Playboy. It's a magazine, a series of nightclubs, a website, a mansion, a reality TV show, and one of the most recognized logos in the entire world. It isn't enough to call Playboy a company, it's an empire. To some people, Playboy is luxury, glamour, the mascot of the sexual revolution. To others, it's filth, corruption, and the decay of American values. But what is it really? Let's open up the centerfold and take a look at the naked reality. They may specialize in beauty, but today we're digging in to the ugly truth about Playboy. In 1963, a budding 28-year-old freelance journalist decided to go undercover at the infamous Playboy Gentlemen's Club, where she would work as a bunny and document her experience behind the scenes. Her name? Gloria Steinem. The woman who would become one of the most famous figures in American feminist history responded to an ad that requested girls who were pretty and personable between 21 and 24 and required applicants to bring a swimsuit or leotard with them to the interview. She created a new persona for the job, Marie, a younger woman with a resume filled with dancing and hostessing all over Europe. From the first moment she arrived at the New York City club before she'd even been offered a job, she was treated like a bunny. That means the security guard calling to her, "Here, bunny, bunny, bunny," and the interviewer shaming her for being awfully old at the ripe old fake age of 24. Round after round of application steps followed as she and other potential bunnies stood around for hours at a time, feet aching in satin high heels, posing for Polaroids in their underwear. And then the fitting, the test of whether she was suited in the official bunny uniform. It was constructed to provide the ideal bunny silhouette. But even the boning in the waist and the meticulous structure of the garment weren't dramatic enough. The wardrobe mistress stuffed some plastic dry cleaning bags into the top of the costume for good measure to add extra dramatic cleavage. This was, Gloria soon learned, commonplace at the Playboy Club. Women used tissues, wool, gym socks, silk scarves, halved sanitary napkins, and, funny enough, cut-up bunny costume tails to accentuate their figures. The costume was so tight that even a sneeze could break the zipper, and several women reported feeling their legs go numb after a few hours in it. But the fitting was a success, at least on an aesthetic level, and Gloria, or rather Marie, was officially hired as an employee of the Playboy Club. Following a physical with a Playboy-approved doctor, it was time for bunny training to begin. There was an in-depth process to prepare her for the world of the Playboy Club, including makeup training, bunny school, floor training, a written test, and several lectures. Then it was time for Steinem to delve into the mysterious inner world of Playboy. It quickly became clear that beneath all the glitz and glamour of the club's reputation, there was a great deal of corruption. The ads for the job had promised a bunny would make $200 to $300 a week, but that was far from the truth. Bunnies were paid $50 a week due to New York City minimum wage laws, and they had to pour a lot of that money back into the club. They paid $2.50 a day for costume upkeep. They had to buy their own heels and replace their own nylons anytime they ripped, at $5 a pop. Large portions of their tips on drink orders were taken away by the club, and while they were permitted to keep cash tips given to them, if they showed a preference for receiving cash tips, they would be fired. Though the club's clientele were not permitted to touch the bunnies, or at least that was the official rule laid out by the club, this was arbitrarily enforced. Sometimes the club's management would test the bunnies on this, hiring undercover secret shoppers of sorts to offer money to a bunny in exchange for sex. If she accepted the offer, she would be fired immediately. The no-touching rule only applied to ordinary guests, however. Number one key holders, the men who paid for a VIP membership, were expected to be accommodated by any bunny whose company they requested. A month after she first applied, her time as a Playboy bunny came to an end. Steinem went to see a doctor about the pain in her feet, lingering as a result of hours standing in uncomfortable high heels. They found that they had permanently grown half a size. The doctors told her that other girls in that line of work would have had their feet swell up several sizes, never to go back down. But she had her scoop, and her story ran in Show magazine under the title A Bunny's Tale. So, what happened after the piece was published? Did it collapse the corrupt Playboy empire once and for all? Well, not exactly. Hugh Hefner wrote Steinem a letter in response, saying that he had no issues with the article and crediting her with the decision to get rid of the blood test and internal physical required for the bunnies. However, as much as he tried to frame himself as a friend to feminism, his own words indicated otherwise. In 1970, years after his seemingly friendly response to Steinem, he wrote a memo in response to a planned feminist protest of the Playboy Mansion, saying, "What I'm interested in is the highly irrational, emotional, kooky trend that feminism has taken. These chicks are our natural enemy. It's time to do battle with them." The article didn't always have the intended effect on its readers either. Some read the piece and they were rightfully horrified by the treatment of the workers at the Playboy Club, but others saw things differently. Steinem received letters from women asking for advice on how they too could become uncomfortable underpaid Playboy bunnies. When she tried to pitch other news outlets to get news scoops, no one wanted to hire her unless they had more salacious, sexy undercover stories to tell. Steinem went on to accomplish a great deal more in her career, but for years she struggled to escape her reputation as the former Playboy bunny. Playboy has always been a brand that attracted controversy, from critiques of its treatment to women and its workers, to protests like the one that made Hefner so angry in 1970. But in 1980, the Playboy name became associated with something much, much darker than any of that: murder. On August 14, 1980, 20-year-old Playboy playmate Dorothy Stratton was found dead from a gunshot wound. Her story made headlines. The one in the Village Voice read, "Death of a Playmate." But what happened to Dorothy? How did she meet such a tragic end? Dorothy was just 17 years old, working part-time at the Dairy Queen in Coquitlam, British Columbia, when she met a 26-year-old club promoter named Paul Snyder. To a teenage girl, Snyder was impressive. He drove a Corvette, he bought her jewelry, and he cooked her fancy dinners. He did everything he needed to do to win her over and convince her to pose nude for photos, which were sent off to Playboy for consideration. Because she was underage, she convinced her mother to sign the model release form for her. Playboy accepted the pictures, and in August 1978, Stratton moved to Los Angeles, California, where she found herself in the coveted position of finalist in the 25th anniversary Great Playmate Hunt. She was Playmate of the Month August 1979, and in June of that same year, she and Snyder tied the knot. Peter Bogdanovich, a film producer who met Stratton at the Playboy Mansion, cast her in They All Laughed, a comedy starring Audrey Hepburn. Shortly after, Stratton moved in with him. From the outside, she appeared to have a glamorous life, but all was not as wonderful as it might have appeared. Dorothy wrote about her experiences in the mansion and as a playmate in a posthumously released 16-page memoir. "Sometimes I cried before I went to sleep. A lot of men were entering my life all of a sudden, and a lot of them wanted me. No one was ever pushy or forceful, but talk can be very powerful, especially to a mixed-up little girl." Snyder became suspicious of his wife and hired a private detective. Then he bought a 12-gauge shotgun. On August 14th, Snyder killed Dorothy with that very shotgun. Peter Bogdanovich blamed Playboy and Hugh Hefner in part for Dorothy's death. In 1984, he published the book The Killing of the Unicorn, a biography of Stratton, an account of the affair, and a scathing critique of Hefner himself. In it, he wrote, "If I had to confront my own responsibility, there could be no way to ignore this," referring to Hugh Hefner. He continued she could not handle the slick professional machinery of the Playboy sex factory, nor the continual efforts of its founder to bring her into his personal fold, no matter what she wanted. Bogdanovich claimed that Hefner, whom Dorothy ostensibly saw as a father figure, had sexually assaulted her at the age of 18. Hefner countered this accusation, stating, "I am publisher of Playboy, or no, a very shy man, and I could no more force myself on a woman psychologically or physically than could the man on the moon." He also accused Bogdanovich of causing the stress that led to his stroke in 1985. Then, for good measure, he threw in a claim that Bogdanovich had seduced Stratton's little sister following her death. Louise Stratton, the sister in question, filed a slander lawsuit against him for this, but later dropped it. In 1989, when Louise was 20 years old, she and Bogdanovich did, in fact, get married. But just because Hefner's accusation of Bogdanovich's interest in Louise Stratton turned out to be true, that doesn't mean Bogdanovich's accusations of Hugh Hefner's conduct are also true. It will never be certain what happened between him and Dorothy Stratton, but she is far from the only woman possibly linked to violence and destructive behavior on the part of Hugh Hefner. It's uncertain exactly how many closets there are in the lavish Playboy mansion, but it seems like every single one of them is filled with skeletons. Playboy magazine and the entirety of Hugh Hefner's empire was built on the foundation of lies and consent violations. Starting with the magazine's inaugural cover, printed right there on the glossy front page were the words, "The famous Marilyn Monroe, nude." But there was just one problem. Marilyn hadn't posed for the photos, she had not agreed to their use, and Hugh Hefner didn't pay her a cent. The photos were taken in 1949 when Marilyn, then without a job, posed nude for a pinup photographer named Tom Kelly for $50 so that she could make her car payment. The shoot took 2 hours, and Kelly promised Monroe that no one would be able to recognize her in the photos. She even signed the release with a false name, Mona Monroe, refusing to put her name on the release. She had no idea that one moment of financial hardship would be one day published for the world to see, with her name printed in bold on the front cover. Kelly sold the photos for $900 to the Western Lithograph Company, and they were later published in a pinup calendar. Meanwhile, Monroe began to find consistent film work, rocketing to stardom with All About Eve, Monkey Business, Niagara, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and How to Marry a Millionaire. In fall 1953, Hefner purchased the rights of the photos and selected one to be published as Sweetheart of the Month, the precursor to the Playmate of the Month. Marilyn never made more than that initial $50 from the photos run, and she once remarked, "I never even received a thank you from all those who made millions off a nude Marilyn photograph." Though the two never met, Hefner spent $75,000 in 1992 to purchase the burial plot next to hers at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, meaning his body will likely be next to hers for eternity, despite their only meaningful interaction being a catastrophic breach of privacy. In recent years, as the legacy of both Playboy and Hugh Hefner have been reassessed, the allegations have been piling up from former bunnies, playmates, and partners of Hefner. The picture they paint of their time with him is grim, to say the least. In 2015, Holly Madison, former playmate and girlfriend of Hefner's, published the memoir Down the Rabbit Hole: Curious Adventures and Cautionary Tales of a Former Playboy Bunny. The book recounted some of her most memorable and upsetting experiences during her time at Playboy. In the years since its publication, she has stuck by her stories and provided more details to those willing to listen. On a December 2021 podcast appearance, Madison described her first sexual encounter with Hefner as a rushed, uncomfortable experience where he was essentially pushed on top of her. 6 months into her time at the mansion, Madison decided to cut her hair short and was met with a torrent of screaming verbal abuse from a furious Hefner. During an appearance on a different podcast, Madison claimed that sex with Hefner was a prerequisite to moving into the mansion. They were also expected to participate in regular unprotected group sex with Hefner, lest they be kicked out. And when Madison did have one-on-one sex with Hefner, she was never sober. She claimed that Hefner offered her quaaludes, or as he called them, thigh openers, the first time they had sex. The mention of quaaludes reappears in the stories of several other former playmates as well, including the accounts of Christina and Carissa Shannon. The Shannon twins alleged that Hefner stuffed them with alcohol and quaaludes on their 19th birthday, after which he had sex with them. Another ex-girlfriend of Hugh Hefner, Sandra Theodore, spoke to the New York Post about her relationship with Hefner, describing how he groomed her, starting when she was just 19 years old. He introduced her to drugs, including, yes, his weapon of choice, quaaludes. In 2022, the most horrifying stories about Playboy and Hefner were exposed in Secrets of Playboy, a 10-part docuseries on A&E. The documentary featured former girlfriends, playmates, bunny mothers, business associates, and more. The allegations made in the docuseries were truly harrowing, and if even 1/10 of them are true, then Playboy was a vile place and Hefner a deeply destructive man. Sandra Theodore alleged that Hefner kept tapes and sensitive photographs of everyone in the mansion that he could use as blackmail material if the occasion ever arose. If this is true, it certainly would explain why so many people waited until he was dead to come forward. According to accounts in the docuseries, bunny mothers, or former bunnies who became managers of sorts, and security worked to cover up scandals at the mansion and clubs. Former bunny mother PJ Maston and former bodyguard James Ellis both shared their stories on the matter, claiming that the cleanup crews were threatened into silence and forced to cover up sexual abuse. This may have been a frequent occurrence, since multiple witnesses claimed that Hefner assaulted playmates who stayed at the mansion. Former playmate Susie Cravacher described her experience in which Hefner drugged her and took advantage of her once she was unconscious. Sandra Theodore also claims that Hefner had a skeleton key that he used to unlock sleeping women's rooms at night whenever he wanted. According to the stories, the abuse didn't end with Hefner either. Many of the VIP celebrity guests at the clubs assaulted bunnies, and they were allowed to return to do it again. A former playmate, Donna Spear, commented on the prevalence of abusers at the mansion, saying, "What predator is not going to go to the mansion? It's locked, it's secure, all the cookies are in the jar." Another common thread in stories about Hugh Hefner is his preference for younger women who'd sometimes be underage. Russell Miller, the author of Bunny, The Real Story of Playboy, claimed in his book that Hefner seduced a minor at his daughter's 16th birthday party. Jennifer Saganor, daughter of Hefner's doctor and friend, alleged in her memoir that Hefner tried to initiate a threesome with her when she was 16 years old. The abuse was not limited to the mansion or the clubs either. Mickey Garcia, former director of Playboy Promotions, has recounted the terrible misogynistic environment she faced while working at Playboy. Garcia transitioned from modeling to the business side after she was allegedly denied Playmate of the Year for not agreeing to sleep with Hefner in order to earn the position. But she wasn't safe in the corporate offices. She and PJ Maston both described an executive at the Chicago office who would greet Garcia by groping her breast and would greet Maston by pushing down her head as if to make her perform oral sex. We haven't spoken about one of the most disturbing allegations, but we need to include it to truly complete the story of Playboy and Hefner. So our more sensitive viewers might want to proceed with caution. In the docuseries, Sandra Theodore talks about walking in on Hugh Hefner performing sex acts with their dog. When she asked him what he was doing, he responded, "Well, dogs have needs." This was not the only story of its kind either. PJ Maston alleged that Hefner and other men at the mansion once made a drugged-up and drunk Linda Lovelace perform oral sex on a German Shepherd. As she did, the men all stood there and watched. These accounts are undeniably stomach-churning, but many still consider one aspect of the Playboy brand to be an important part in cultural history: the magazine. At the time, Playboy was one of the only magazines willing to publish controversial material or work that wouldn't be accepted in other publications. Shortly after Playboy's founding, the magazine published the short story The Crooked Man by Charles Beaumont. The extremely divisive story at the time depicted a world run by a majority gay population in a bit of pro-gay social commentary. Though readers flooded the magazine with angry letters, Hefner stood by the piece. Other vital voices in civil rights were published in the magazine, including James Baldwin and an interview with Malcolm X. Groundbreaking fiction writers contributed to the magazine, such as Margaret Atwood, Ursula Le Guin, Ray Bradbury, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. When a young woman named Jessica Hahn was assaulted by her boss, famous evangelical preacher Jim Baker, Playboy published her account of the attack in an interview, their sensational reputation bringing more eyes to the story. Some of them were there to see the semi-nude photographs of Hahn, but she was still given the opportunity to discuss what happened in her own words. Even so, it is difficult to reconcile the groundbreaking journalism and literature that appeared in Playboy with the horrors that they hid deeper down the rabbit hole. Playboy undoubtedly was a complicated legacy and a messy past. But what about its present? With Hugh Hefner gone, who runs Playboy now? The magazine is no longer affiliated with the Hefner family and is instead owned by the private equity firm Rizvi Traverse. What about the mansion? That was sold in 2016 to Darren Metropolis, the owner of Hostess. Hugh Hefner is dead. The magazine is no longer Hefner property, and the mansion was purchased with snack cake money. What does any of that mean for the future of Playboy? Do the new owners and the staff still run things the way Hefner allegedly did? When Insider reached out to Playboy for comment on the allegations made in Secrets of Playboy, a representative from the brand responded, "We trust and validate these women and their stories, and we strongly support these individuals who have come forward to share their experiences. As a brand with sex positivity at its core, we believe safety, security, and accountability are paramount." They went on to say, "Please join us in doing the most important thing we can do right now: listen. It is critically important that we listen as these women share their stories and continue to fight harassment and discrimination in all of its forms, support healing and education, redefine tired and sexist definitions of beauty, and advocate for inclusivity across gender, sexuality, race, age, ability, and zip codes." Here's hoping they really mean it and that Playboy will become a better place than it was. Now watch how the FBI tried to destroy Playboy, or watch this video instead.